It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, it's been an incredible 7 days in America, and we have a lot to talk about. But I'm sure you and most of America was stunned by what took place in Washington earlier this week when a senior official of the White House of Donald Trump made some startling disclosures. There's so many directions we can talk about this in, but I have to say that, you still have to wonder with Donald Trump, will anything stick? It's like we've been here before, time and time again, where a disclosure has been made that everybody would say in conventional wisdom is the kiss of death, and yet here he is. So I just, not to be too cynical, but that, I worry about that.
I think that's an important, that's an important question because Donald Trump is the original Teflon man, and he announced it in his campaign. He said he could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and his supporters would let him get away with it. I hope this is different. I mean, I think the last 2 weeks have been pretty startling in our country's history. I mean, you had 2 Supreme Court decisions to reverse Roe versus Wade and to allow people to carry guns in public much more easily that went against overwhelming popular opinion. And then you've had this incredible testimony. I mean, Cassidy Hutchinson was, I think, a very compelling and very convincing witness. And for being only 25 years old and having a sense of right and wrong that seems to have escaped so many of the people, former President Trump, and so many of the people around him. Boy, it makes me believe that what Judge Ludig said is right, that Trump and his people represent a clear and present danger to our democracy. As he said, democracy is on a knife's edge. But it's not just democracy, it's also the concept of majority rule. Now, I don't believe in tyranny of the majority, but on the other hand, a democracy, majority rule is a big part of our democracy. And one of the things that is become very clear is how our political institutions have really been slow to deal with rapid change in the country. And you can see it in the Electoral College, where Democrats have to win by more than 3% to have an even chance of the popular vote, to have an even chance of winning. They won the popular vote 7 out of the last 8 times. And in this century, a third of the elections have gone to the loser of the popular vote, which is 2 out of 6. You see it in the Senate, where Craig's state of California has 39.5 million votes, which is equal or greater than the 21 smallest states. And the 39.5 million people in those 21 smallest states have 42 senators. In California, with the same number of people, or even greater, have only 2. That skews the Electoral College. There have been a lot of analyses that show that Democrats have to win an overwhelming majority of the popular vote for Senate to even break even. Just to wrap this point up, the current Senate that's broken up 50-50, over 48% or over 58, or the Democrats have about a 12-point margin in actual votes for senator. And what we saw in the Supreme Court, which is always behind times, is that the deciding votes were cast by 3 justices who were appointed by a president who lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes in 2016, and confirmed by a Senate that represented 45% of the population. So those are big structural imbalances that we're going to have to deal with.
Greg, what's your take on this last chapter in the Trump saga?
First, I think I want to start by saying to Cassidy Hutchinson, thank you. Here is a woman who, with remarkable poise at 25 years old, has done what far more senior members of the White House staff have failed to do, and that's actually defend the Constitution and step up and report on what she saw. I think it's also, we're in a different place because what she saw, what she witnessed, what she in some cases was told, is for the most part irrefutable. The biggest defense came from people who jumped up and said, well, the president couldn't have possibly grabbed the steering wheel in the limousine. First of all, most of those people have never been in that limousine. Secondly, the president wasn't in that limousine on the morning in question. He was in a SUV, Suburban. And they quickly, that great defense of Trump quickly wilted. There's been very little else. And I think that's because the people in that White House around Donald Trump knew him to be what he is. And that was portrayed in very stark and clear terms by Cassidy Hutchinson. And, a lot of people have remarked that she's only 25 years old. She's only 24 years old when she served. As Al well knows, that's not a surprise to us. It's those people in their 20s and early 30s who staff the White House, who staff departments and agencies, who staff members of Congress. They're very bright. These positions are competitive. They're bright. They're very engaging. They're loyal. And so for a person from that group of support staff to step out and do this when so many others have failed is remarkable, but it's not in some ways surprising. What is also the case is that she's not alone. There were a lot of other people in her age group that were support staff to people. And one of the things that you find with people in those roles, in addition to their competency, is that they watch everything. They key off of the people they serve. They pay attention to what's going on. And so I really think we've entered a whole new, not chapter, but a new book here in terms of what went on in the Trump White House, about which I just don't think there's going to be any ability to refute. And so what we have is somebody who was completely out of control, seemingly. The notion that he would tell people to let individuals into his speech who carried weapons, including automatic weapons, because they weren't there to shoot him, begs the question of who he thought they were there to shoot. But this is somebody that, like the likes of which we just haven't seen. And so I think, as we've talked about on this program before, there's been a slow decline in the significance of the former president. I think that decline steepened this week. And suddenly it opens the doors to people who would wish to challenge him, should he even consider running. It makes it look even more difficult for him to ever step back into the political arena. So I really think it was quite a moment in this process. And I think that I'm sure the committee, Liz Cheney in particular, could have only been delighted that somebody would come forward with as much information as she has. And it puts enormous pressure now on more senior people to do the same thing, which I frankly hope they will do, so we can put this very unpleasant period behind us.
It's interesting, Craig. It's in many ways, this is also a chief of staff story, isn't it? I mean, given your experience, what's your take on that front?
I remember reading And I spent time, I did get to know him a little bit, HR Bob Haldeman. Not somebody that is often, quoted perhaps, but Bob Haldeman said at one point in a book and in discussion, there are often times when the president asks you to do something that you simply go away and don't do. And it's because of the judgment that hopefully a chief of staff has to know that in 24, 36, 48 hours, people will calm down. It's the kind of the same as write that nasty letter, but put it in the drawer and sleep on it overnight before you take action. So a chief of staff actually does take an oath of office, an oath to protect the Constitution, and does have responsibilities to a higher level than just the principle that he or she serves. And there were plenty of times when I would say to the president, I had concerns, not about the legality of doing something, but I'd say to a vice president, but had concerns about a path we are on. And that's what you're there for. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't just sit in your office and, sit on your cell phone and tell staffers that the president doesn't want to intervene in a riot. I mean, that imagery is just so foreign to, I think, any of us who have served there. And it does. I mean, the Mark Meadows as chief of staff should be called to account. And the other thing that's out there that I hear the phrase used a lot, which I think we're going to hear more of, is that silence is no longer in some ways justifiable. Somebody might have confused silence for loyalty, but now that we're getting a better picture of what happened, just remaining silent and accepting that January 6th, or even accepting the 4 years of Trump's presidency is really not acceptable anymore. And people with knowledge ought to come forward, at least in my view.
Al, the other thing that we have to look at in this program is the decision on Roe versus Wade. It seems like ancient history now. What is the political consequences of Roe versus Wade?
First, I'd like to go back to a couple of things that Craig said. One, like him, I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to Cassidy Hutchinson. And he's right about the role young people play in the White House and in the Congress. Let's not forget that John Dean was only 31 years old when he broke open the Watergate scandal. And the thing that came out most clearly to me from her testimony is how completely deranged Trump is. I mean, I've been around a lot of people with tempers, and somebody might pick up some paper and throw a speech on the floor and say, what a piece of nonsense. But to have a president who continuously throws White House china against the wall and pulls out tablecloths, a little deranged. And part of his derangement is to demand absolute loyalty from his staff. And, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, we forget that when he was in the Congress, he was considered part of the loony duo with Jim Jordan of Ohio. Now they've been surpassed by Marjorie Taylor Greene and her crowd for nuttiness, but Mark Meadows was never viewed as somebody of stability or integrity, and as a result, he was perfect fit. And it doesn't surprise me that he remained loyal to Trump and his own political concerns. Roe versus Wade, I believe, is in itself, it's a critically important decision because it affects so many people, and it is the taking away of a right that the court had previously granted, and that's never, as far as I know, that's never been done before. In 2018, the threat of Trump and the threat of taking away Roe had a big impact on the midterm elections. This year, I suspect it won't be as great, but what it does is that, as I started to say at the beginning of the show, you put it together with that gun decision and the way the Trump coup, and you have real threats to democracy. And if the Democrats are skillful in how they portray that issue, it is possible, I don't say necessarily likely, that they could change the odds a little bit. I don't think I haven't seen enough polling yet. I mean, now the polling actually is starting to go all over the lot on the congressional generic head to head. I mean, the solid Republican lead is still there in some polls, but in others, the Democrats have gained 10 or 12 points. So we don't know yet. But like in 1974, this country will face a midterm in the midst of a very serious political constitutional crisis where democracy is on the line. And if the Democrats are skillful, if they can keep their own extremist wing under control, it is very possible that they could reverse the normal odds in a midterm election.
Greg, you have the last word this time.
So with respect to the Supreme Court decision on abortion, I agree with Al. I think the odds still favor generally a strong Republican election year. However, I do see it changing, and I think one of the reasons, in addition to what Al said, one of the reasons is that those who pursued the decision that the court ultimately provided can't take a victory and settle back and enjoy it. They are talking actively about how much further we can go. And when you start getting into the concept of rolling back settled issues on privacy, gay marriage, and other things, you're suddenly opening yourself up to a campaign against a whole list of things that aren't really before the court, but could be. And I think that can shape people's thinking about Senate races. That's where Supreme Court justices go to get confirmed. It can shape their thinking about even state elections. While I wish that a matter that seemed to have been settled would have remained settled, it didn't. And I'm not going to argue the merits of the decision. I think majority found the weaknesses in a past decision. That's one thing. But to then turn around and suggest we're going to go further is going to alarm a lot of people in the middle, a lot of people who are independent, who are going to say, we're not going to provide a Congress or a Senate that can confirm those individuals and down the road, should they come before the Senate. And it could have impact. And you do have this factor that Al mentioned of the gun control concern. So you have single issue voters who generally don't tip the scale too much, but this year I think they could.
We'll have to leave it there. Craig Fuller, Al Fromm, thank you very much indeed. We will see you next week.